Hi everyone and welcome to The Recovery. On this episode, I'm joined by the amazing Tina McGuff, who is an expert and because she's lived it in eating disorders and mental health and has written many books. Is it many books or is it one book?
One book.
One book that could be many books because it's so good read. You know, I'm saying to you, when I read it, it kind of, there was bits of it I thought I really relate to this and stuff. But the reason I wanted you to join us on The Recovery is because you've recovered and are recovering from eating disorders and mental health, and they play a big part in everybody's lives. And I think it's really important that we touch on this in this series. So, without further ado, Tina McGuff, tell us your story.
Okay, I will do, and thanks very much, first of all, for asking me to do this, because it's, like you said, it's so important. So, very potted version. When we were 13, well, when I was 13, I'm the eldest of 4 girls. Went to bed one night as normal, sharing a bed with my 2 sisters. My little sister was in my mum and dad's room. She was a toddler, and I got woken up by our neighbour during the night who tapped me on the shoulder, this man. And I was only 13 at the time, and our life was really very happy, we thought anyway, right? On the surface it seemed very happy, very naive. We didn't have any problems. We thought mum and dad had a great marriage, everything seemed fine. And he said to me, and he had my sister, and he said, Tina, get your sisters, there's been an accident. So I was obviously terrified. I got my little sisters, and we kind of followed him down the stairs. And as we got out my room to go to the stairs, the house was full of police officers, and we were terrified. We didn't know what the hell was going on. So we started to walk down, and we could see blood, and it was just awful. So he said, look, trust me, your mom and dad are fine, but there has been a problem. So he took us across to his mother and father-in-law's house that lived across from us. And yeah, that was it. Basically what happened was my mum had found out that my dad was not who she thought he was. There was lots of things going on behind the scenes, and she attacked him this night with a kitchen knife. So she was in jail, he was in hospital, and it was just a mess, an absolute mess. So we ended up, it was just, honestly, I didn't know how to cope, right? This is why I do what I do now, because back then in the 80s, I didn't have any coping mechanisms. We've spoken, I've heard you speak about this to people before. We had nothing to rely on, right? We didn't talk about things. No one told you anything. And I just went mad. I just turned feral. Our house was repossessed. We ended up like living in a tiny, tiny little bed set. My mum.
My daughter just decided she wants to drink her water sitting next
to
me. I can hear her.
That's okay.
Well, you're telling a really important story. So
that's okay.
To carry on, sorry.
That's okay. So we ended up just going from a very stable, happy life to a very unstable, very unhappy life. And I just couldn't cope, right? So I ended up turning to the usual alcohol, cannabis, solvent abuse. I heard you talking to, I think it was Meg Matthews, about how we used to abuse solvents and so on. Yeah. That's exactly what I did.
Wire fluids, glue.
Yeah, all of it.
Yeah, felt tip.
All of it.
It starts off with that whole felt tip pen bars, and then, it moves on to poppers and stuff like that, which we all think we're having fun and just like getting high from it. But, we don't realise the actual extent of the damage that solvents can do really quickly.
Oh, no. It's horrible. I remember, I'm not proud of this at all. I'm embarrassed by my behaviour now, but I didn't understand then. They used to sell us it in old crisp packets, Evo stick, and already made from the cream pan. Yeah.
Where did you buy that?
Yeah, we bought it, or we go and buy. Yeah, it was terrible.
Like a glue sniffer's ice cream van.
Yeah, it was terrible.
That's crazy.
I know. We sit in the common room with these little empty crisp packets.
Yeah.
Oh, horrendous. Anyway, this was
at
13.
Then? Still 13, 14, yeah?
Yeah, I just went off the scale. I had long hair like this. I got it all shaved off. I never used to wear makeup. I started lathering makeup. I got piercings. I started doing everything you can imagine. This system, that what happens, this trajectory. And I couldn't speak to anybody because I was shit scared if I spoke to anyone that we would all be taken into care or separated. And I felt like a terrible sister, a terrible daughter. I just felt useless and worthless and all that. But the only thing that actually made me feel kind of happy was dancing and swimming and exercise, right? But on a healthy, I never had a body issue, right? I never looked to myself and thought I was fat or anything like that. It was nothing to do with that. But anyway, it just got worse and worse and worse, right? And I didn't actually take any drugs. Like I never took ecstasy or anything like that. It was all just solvent abusing and alcohol. And I would wake up in a park on my own, pitch black, unconscious, on the floor with homeless men sitting next to me. I don't know. I put myself in so many awful, vulnerable positions. And I think I did that almost vicariously to die.
Yeah, of course.
I really believe I was wishing death quickly. So anyway, it was awful. I remember trying to reach out once. I phoned an orphanage because I was desperate. And I asked if they could take us in, like as a family, as sisters. And they basically laughed me off the phone. I phoned the Samaritans and they were brilliant. They tried to help me on the phone. And only one teacher kind of stopped me in my tracks and asked me if I was okay. And of course I lied and said I was fine. But to this day, Tony, I really wish I'd been able to say to this teacher, can you please help me? I really desperately need someone.
You can't carry that through life thinking, I wish I'd done that. Because at that point in time, you weren't ready to say that.
No, definitely not.
And it takes such a lot, and so much pain and so much disaster as such to get to that point where you actually had no choice but to ask for help. I mean, if it was that easy, none of us would have a problem.
That's true. That's true. So I went on this trajectory, and a friend of ours owned a fish and chip shop, and they gave me some hours to kind of earn some money because I was raking bins for bottles, you know, to exchange for money to feed my sisters. We had nothing. Like, we'd sit in the dark. We had nothing. It was awful. So anyway, this all-consuming behavior took over, and then this Italian family really felt sorry for me, and they took me to Italy with them. They used to go every year. I'd never been on a holiday, so they took me with them. And on this beach this day, I thought, and I still to this day don't know if I made it up in my own head, which I think I did. I thought I saw this woman indicate my bum was big. Now, I was like 15, just about to turn 16. I didn't care about that. But something triggered in my head, and that's actually why my book's called Seconds to Snap, because it was literally a second to snap and my whole life changed. And I suddenly felt this urge to stick my fingers down my throat. And that's what happened. It was that day, that moment, that time.
Simple as that.
I then, just as quick as that. And it was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. And this is a thing that's often recurring. People will remember a comment. Some won't, but I do. Yeah. And the poor woman probably didn't even do that. It's just my brain making it fit, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And that was it. I came back from that place a very different person.
I mean, for me, you know, my name's, as you know, Fat Tony. And that comes from when I was a kid and I was fat. From the age of, there was a lot of stuff that happened, trauma-based stuff that happened between the ages of 10 and 14, where I was abused and I become sexualized, and, you know, my whole life become one of such despair. But at the time I thought I was coping with it, and I wasn't. So I turned to food as a crutch, and then alcohol. But what came from that was the fact that I got fat really quickly as a defense, so that I didn't want anyone to come near me. But the name calling behind my name was, you know, people were like, oh, which Tony? Fat Tony. And that's where the name came from. And very quickly, over the course of 6 to 8 months after being called that and getting to the point where I wanted to kill myself for being so overweight, because I weighed 18 stone at one point. And that was the turning point, you know, the name calling and the bullying that came from it. I kind of thought, I'm not having this anymore. And I kind of turned it around and owned it. Do you know what I mean? I was like, okay, that's my name. Do you know what I mean? And I kind of kept that name, and I lost the weight really quickly. And that was before I discovered drugs. I didn't lose the weight through drugs. I lost the weight through willpower of change and not wanting to be bullied anymore.
Oh, it is. It's about it's about defense, it's about control.
Yeah.
And it's so complicated, isn't it? It's so complex in the way we see ourselves and how our brain works, right? And like we didn't choose for that to happen. These things happened to us.
Yeah.
And our brain just reacts to that. And that's what, with an eating disorder, for example, or anorexia, what I developed, it's an emotional response to very difficult circumstances.
Yeah.
And my inability to cope. Probably now, if it happened now, I might have not been in that position, because people talk.
Talk me through a day of what a day would be like with anorexia.
Sure. So it's not a quick process either. So I started running more and more and more, right? I started running to the library, figuring out nutrition, writing down all the calories. I would run past dentist surgeries, run in, rip out recipe books, pretend to be a patient in all different doctors and dentist surgery across the city. I would just weigh myself every single day. I'd run to Boots. I had this big machine. I'd keep these little leaflet, like the little printouts, like the holy grail of scales. And the more I lost weight, the better it become. And then I became so unwell that for me, to become the best anorexic in the world, and I only discovered what I had just before I became so unwell. I ended up sectioned. And I thought that I had emptied my body of everything. You know, I hadn't eaten, I'd stopped drinking, like it just became so bad. Even I'd emptied my whole bowels. It was horrendous, Tony, horrendous.
Did you take, were you doing lots of like X-Lax, you know, lots of like...
Yeah, I used to eat a box of X-Lax a day. So
yeah, it's quite common in the 80s for a lot of people to actually eat them. So that like clear the bowels out.
Yeah.
And, you know, and it became quite normal for a while for people to actually do that. Do you get what I mean? The thinking around it was like, okay, well, I've got to do this tomorrow. I need to look thinner. I'm wearing a dress.
Yes.
Blah, blah, blah. I'm going to a party. So I'm not going to eat for 3 days, and I'll take a load of tablets to actually make me get rid of that system.
It's like if you look at adverts for John Player special cigarettes back in the 70s, 80s, it was literally telling you would look stunning and super slim if you had a cigarette in your hand. Like that, they advocated you would be slim. So yeah, of course I smoked as well, because I thought that was
the longer the cigarette, the thinner your hand looks, right?
Exactly. The chicer you. So this was the time of that way of thinking. So that is why I behaved in all these ways.
When did you realize that you had a problem?
Well, I kept running to the library all the time, and I thought to myself one day, what the hell's wrong with me? Like, why am I so not wanting to eat? You know, why am I obsessing over exercise? Thousands of exercises a day, hours and hours and hours. And so I looked up just eating problems, and I found a book, and it was pretty much a book and in there. And I thought, right, yeah, I have all these indicators. I obviously have anorexia, but I was hiding it. Obviously, I didn't tell anybody. But yeah, I ended up, by the time I was 16, I was sectioned into an adult psychiatric unit. And that's where I kind of lived for the next 4 years, in and out.
You were in there for 4 years?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. It
was horrendous. It was hell. It was really awful, but that's the way it went.
So how did the process of having anorexia and to coming out of a secure unit, how did that, what was that process?
So it turns out I was using a lot of my not wanting to eat, right, starvation, to shrink and shrivel up and die, and to also hide myself from any attention, right, from any attention from men or anything like that. So what you were saying earlier about it's a shield, and I was using it, but obviously it's just in a different way. One end of this is two sides of the same coin, really. But when I eventually got a lot of psychiatric help every single day, a lot of I was trying to end my life literally every single day by not eating. I tried to throw myself out a window. I tried so many different times to end it, but I had great psychiatric care from this team. And by the time I was 20, I was living in a rehab unit in my town because I didn't really have a home to go to. And from there, I had to then relearn how to become a proper member of society. And that was one of the biggest battles, actually,
So
trying to fit in.
What tools do you use so that when you were learning to rehabilitating to act and live normally, what were the tools that you were taught to use around eating disorders?
Well, because it's an obsession and an addiction, right? These behaviors are so difficult to beat. I mean, you know what addiction's like, and it's the same with exercise and food and all these negative self-harming addictions. And it's just I used a lot of CBT that worked for me, but doesn't work for everybody. So it worked for me. I was lucky. So it's trying to break that pattern all the time. It's working on yourself. But I used to read a lot. I used to go back to the library and read a lot. And that's where I learned and understood, because I wanted to know why my brain had wanted to kill me. Like, why was I such a bad person? Yeah. Why? So I believe in the power of other people's stories. And I just started reading everybody's stories and books and psychology books. And when I came across the hierarchy of needs by Maslow and all his work, it just made sense to me. It was like, wow, this makes sense. So as soon as I realized that this behavior was a product and a coping mechanism to my own trauma or my own inability to cope, I kind of started to make sense of it all by using all the tools I'd learned in hospital, the ones I was still getting, the ones I was learning from books, and I just kind of started to do that. And it was about building up self-confidence and self-awareness each day.
Can I ask you, what year was this?
This was in the early 90s.
So in the early 90s, did they identify it as addiction? Or they just identify it as, okay, did they give it a name like anorexia? But, did they actually work out, did they, back then, did they know the addiction benefits of it, the actual addiction side to it?
No, but it's interesting you should say that, because to me, it's very complex, right? I had OCD, which was not only over the food and the calories, it was about plugs and the dangers and all these things.
So did you have to switch the plug on and off, on and off, on and off?
Yeah, I couldn't sleep. When I stayed at my granny's sometimes, she didn't live far from the hospital. When I'd get out for the weekend, I'd go and stay with her. I couldn't sleep. I'd be up 20, 30 times checking. I turned off plugs in the living room.
We had Bryony Gordon on here a couple of weeks ago, and she talked about her OCD in the sense that, she would have to write out these lines like hundreds of thousands of times so that she didn't become a paedophile. That in her mind, that if she didn't write this, her parents were going to die. She was going to become a paedophile. It was just, just the extent. And for me, as I explained in the Bryony interview, chat, that I used to think that I had OCD because I can't go to sleep if there's a unwashed fork in the sink, or that something's out of place in my living room. That's not OCD. That's just obsessive personality disorder. That's the way I am. I'm obsessive around tidiness. But, to me, I would always say, I've got OCD. And it wasn't until I had that talk with Bryony that I thought, wow, I don't know what OCD is. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And it's interesting that you've touched on it as well. Because when we, as addicts, or, we go through life and we think, okay, well, I'm an addict, I've got a cocaine problem, I've got an alcohol problem. We don't look at the bigger picture of everything else. We put it all into one box. So therefore, okay, I'm going to go to rehab. I'm going to get treated for drink and for alcohol and drug abuse, and then everything's going to be fine. That's not how it works. That's not how it works. In the fairy tales, that's how it works.
Yeah, exactly.
Because when we're left with us, and there's an amazing saying that you take the alcohol out of fruitcake, what are you left with? And it's fruitcake. That's when the real work starts, and we actually start thinking, okay, wow, I do this. And the identification that I get and you get from talking about this is unparalleled. It's amazing.
Absolutely.
I find myself thinking, oh my God, I actually do that. I'm a real, I have body dysmorphia. I can put on a few pounds and I look in the mirror and I will think, oh my God, you look like a fat pig. And used to control my day. I would do that in the morning. I would think, oh my God, look at you, you're really old, you're really fat. And that would go into that mindset where I hated and loathed myself. Today, I have through the 12-step program I work, I have tools to deal with that. You know, at the beginning of this year, I did, beginning of last February, a year ago actually, I did a video for Mix Mag, and in it I wore a pink t-shirt, and I hate it. I hate that video more than anything. The live stream.
Really?
I feel like Barney the dinosaur DJ.
Oh,
I
no.
look so fat in it, and that spurred me on to lose all my weight again, but in a really healthy, productive way, not in an obsessive, dangerous way. And I just think that, you know, for me today, I have to watch that stuff.
Yes, it's always lurking at the side of, you know what I mean? Yes,
always there.
But I think the complexities with anorexia, you can never treat it in isolation. Like you just said, it's never as simple as this person doesn't eat, or this person is super skinny, therefore she must be this. I think they used to do that, but I don't think anymore, because it is OCD, it's depression, it's anxiety, it's suicidal ideation, it's self-harming to the, you know, so many of the people I met have really physically harmed themselves in so many ways, not just as in what you imagine, so many ways, right? By not looking after yourself, by drinking, by putting yourself sexually in positions you would never have done. All these kind of things have been done by people in the same psychiatric hospital as me, right? And they've had anorexia label, but they have so many other behaviors that can also be identified. So yeah, it's very complex. So when you ask that question, did they label it as an obsession or an addiction? No, but I knew that my behaviors, when I used to speak to people with other illnesses or mental illnesses, I could identify often what they had in my thoughts. But what you said about Bryony, when I came out of hospital, I thought I started to try and build a life, right? I tried to build a life. My granny took me to Rosyth, you know Rosyth by Queensferry, by Edinburgh.
No, you lost me.
There's a naval base there, and
okay.
So she took me to this Navy day, and there was this Harrier jump jet, right? And I had no skills, qualifications, nothing, Tony. I'd been in a psychiatric unit, right? So I saw this jump jet and I thought, that's it, I want to be a fast jet pilot. So I went into the RAF careers office on the Monday, and I'm like, hi, how do you be a Harrier jump jet pilot? And you can imagine they laughed me at the door, right? So I was like, you know what, screw this, I need to do stuff. So I joined the Territorial Army. I didn't tell them I'd just come out of a psychiatric unit because they wouldn't let me in. And I loved it. I learned so much.
Did you have to do medical when you joined the TA?
It was amazing. I had to do a wee test, but it was brilliant.
That was it.
Yeah. And then a fitness test, but I was very fit anyway. I then wanted to be a pilot. So through a friend, I got a loan and I got my private pilot's license. I was all set to become a commercial pilot. I mean, things were going really well, okay, really well.
When you go for a pilot's license, do they not do checks to see whether you're same mind to fly a plane?
Yeah, well, they are. Like, you do a medical, and I went to the medical, but I would never have passed the commercial pilot medical. Ultimately, I would never have been able. Because actually, it's quite scary to think. You couldn't, I wouldn't have passed it, but I got my PPL, which is the private one. It was amazing. But what happened was I was still very obsessive about fitness, what I ate, my behaviors were still there, right? They were always there controlling me. So I met this man who's now, I've been married 25 years to Jock, and on Valentine's Day, he walked into our business on Christmas Day one year, fell in love. So everything seemed to be going great, right? And then suddenly, things started to change in my head. I started to see lights so bright. I couldn't cope with the light. Like any light, I would be like, what's going on here? He played ice hockey. I couldn't even stand being in an ice rink because the light was so bright in my eyes. I wasn't drinking. I wasn't smoking. I was a fitness fanatic. I'd given up all that stuff. Teetotaler. I think I started to get ruminating thoughts in my head. Like what Bryony was saying, it was things like that going on in my head the whole time. I couldn't get away from these thoughts. They were in all the time. It was killing me until this one day, my sister lived in the top floor of this building, and I went up to see her, and she has big bay windows, and I thought I had an invisible bungee cord around my waist that was about to whip me out the window. I couldn't control it, Tony. It was this horrible, horrible feeling of something about to kill me without me wanting to do it. So I quickly kind of grabbed onto the chair and onto the walls and ran into my car, drove myself to the psychiatric unit, and I had psychosis. I was in a full-blown psychotic episode, and that came with a lot of what Bryony was talking about. This going over and over. If this happens, if I lose control, I'm going insane, and it's horrible, and it's very like that.
Came from nowhere again, right? Just like
nowhere. And I thought I was doing well, so it knocked me back a year. It took me a year to kind of recover from that. But touch wood, I've been fine since, as in that sense. But I didn't give up my control and obsession until about just nearly 15 years ago. I eventually, you know what, I still got up, and like my kids would be in a pool at 6 in the morning. They had to be in the gym pool at 6. They had to be eating spirulina with a natural yogurt for breakfast. You know, I was this obsessive parent, right? Because I wanted to do it right. I thought, I can't fuck up their lives. I want to be a good mom. I want them to be healthy and this and that. And so anyway, I eventually lived this life. I wouldn't allow myself like a real Coke or an ice cream until I was like 36 or something. And I'd seen this advert. I was exhausted. I was pissed off with this behavior, right?
You never had a Coca-Cola or an ice cream till you were 36?
Oh, no, it was just too... No, I maybe had a bit in bits and pieces, but I was very controlled. Like I would then skip other things or have to run.
Yeah, okay, right.
Yeah? So I'd seen this advert for strawberry shortcake Haagen-Dazs ice cream, and I thought this one day, you know what? Fuck it. Excuse my language. And I went and bought this whole tub, and I ate the whole thing. And it was the most liberating thing I've ever done in my life. And I'm now 51, and I don't care that I'm like 2 stone heavier than I was then. I've never been happier. I've never been happier since.
So you saw the advert for the ice cream and you ate it. Did you have it the next day? Did you hate yourself for eating it?
No. No.
That shows you how far you've come.
Yeah, I think it was just, I'd had enough. I'd all these years of this behavior, I had enough. I was exhausted. I was fed up being controlled anymore. I didn't want to control my kids and their outcome. I wanted them to never have that behavior. And yeah, it was literally like a little weight was lifted.
How many kids have you got now?
We have 4. So the youngest is 22, and I've touched wood. You know, it's been fine. They've been great. So
none of the traits or any of the obsessions passed on?
No, then that was a big concern. So that was a big concern about having kids. I didn't want them because I was scared that, you know, but I looked at...
For me, I'm a firm believer that it's definitely an hereditary thing with mental illness and addiction, especially with addiction. You know, my father, his whole family, the grandfather, there's been addiction all the way through on my dad's side. And so I'm a firm believer that it goes like, but I know people, you know, I've got 2 brothers, they're both addicts.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Like, yeah, my older brother's an alcoholic, and my younger brother was addicted to skunk for many years. He's now addicted to making money. You know, just shifted.
Right.
You know?
Right.
But you can't tell him that he's an addict. Oh, I'm not an addict anymore. But you're just like, no, but you work all hours. You get high off of what you earn. It's exactly the same thing. Yeah. But, you know, I'm a firm believer that it's in our blood and it's in our wiring. So sometimes it does shift a generation. It's kind of bizarre, and I just think, you know, that because it's really weird, because I personally wouldn't have thought that anorexia was an addiction. I would have been, yeah, well, that's just a mental stage, you know what I mean? And it's really interesting that you brought it to that because now I can understand it.
Yeah. Oh, is it? Absolute. And your whole life is consumed by being the thinnest and being the fastest, and well, it's all in your head, Tony. You don't discuss it with anybody. No. It's all the secret, you know, very deceptive behavior to try and keep this secret in your own ways. But in my family, like my siblings and my family, they obviously have problems. Like there is addiction problems in there, but thankfully it's not coming to my kids so far. But God, I'm praying.
Maybe they got to their dad. They might have their dad, more of their dad's genes.
Well, yeah, Jock's never had like anything in his family or him. He's been really lucky. So, but he now appreciates, because he came to see me every single day, twice a day when I was in with psychosis. You know, I was so scared that I would lose this new kind of boyfriend in my life.
Of course.
You know, but he stuck with me.
But that's why we cover this stuff up, because our ego and our shame that we carry, you know, we cover that shame up by overcompensating in other areas. So because we don't want anyone to know really what's going on for us. Smoke and mirrors. And that's the sad thing about it, because people don't find out until it's too late. People think, oh my God, well, I knew she was thin. But I thought she was really into fitness. They have no clue that it's actually where your mental head's at. And, you know, it's like that old thing where people go, oh, when someone committed suicide, they couldn't take any more. And everyone around me, well, I didn't even notice really. I mean, it just seemed normal to me. And it's kind of a thing like, you know, maybe you didn't take the time to notice.
Yeah.
People around us don't notice because they're too consumed with what they're doing and their own drama of life. Do you know what I mean? To actually notice what we're up to. I mean,
that's true.
I couldn't hide mine in the end. Mine was so blatant. I thought I did a good job of it by spraying myself orange and put my hand over my mouth when I spoke so no one could see I had no teeth. But, you know, in my mind, I actually weighed 7 stone towards. For about the last 18 months of my using, I weighed 7 stone, which is very, very thin. And I had amazing cheekbones. And I kind of just was like, oh, you know, and I could put my hands around my waist at one point.
Yes,
And I actually thought, oh my God, you look amazing.
Oh, did you really? So you started to think like that then?
I actually used to think that I looked amazing, super thin. Everyone was jealous of how thin I was. But, you know, that kind of calm didn't come up like overnight. That happened over the course of many years of not eating. Because I would go out for 6 nights, no sleep. And that had 6 nights at its worst. But, you know, normally it would be 3 to 4 nighs generally of no sleeping and just drinking alcohol and no food. And then I would eat for 2 days when I could. And then that process would start again.
That is crazy.
And, you know, and I used to think in my head that no one knew.
Really? Isn't it funny how you think that you're hiding everything so well?
Yeah.
But see when you said, you know, you obviously relapsed often, right? You kind of got up.
It wasn't a relapse because I never stopped. So for me, it was one continuation for 28 years. There was never, I mean, there was many days where I would say I'm not doing this anymore, and then go to sleep, and the next day I'd do it again. But there was never any long period of more than 2 days where and even in those 2 days, I was on some form of pan, like temazepam, diazepam.
Right.
You know, there was never any long clean time bits where I thought, right, I'm going to give this up and become clean, because being clean was not an option. I was so far gone within the addiction. So also, as I always very, you know, I've said it so many times about all I actually looked forward to was dying, because it had got to that point.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until I actually put down and made that decision, that God-given moment, you know, the gift of desperation that changed my life and gave me life, because I didn't have life for many years, that thought process changed. And I remember going for a psychiatric report to go to treatment, and they said, have you ever self-harmed? And I was like, no, never. And I was sitting there, and my partner was like, what? And I was like, he said, have you ever self-harmed? He went, of course you have. I was, no, I haven't. I started arguing that I'd never self-harmed. He was like, you pulled all your teeth out with screwdrivers and sticks and you know, and that's self-harm, Tony. And I still couldn't get my head around the fact that was self-harm. I thought that was normal. I'd normalized it.
Wow, that is amazing how your brain just does these things to make it fit. But can I ask you, because I've obviously watched your documentary, listened to so many of your things, you know, that last time when your partner said that to you,
yeah,
and it changed, what do you think it was? Like, I'm always curious, because like I also know what changed in me. I was angry with it and not control. But what was it that changed in you that one time out of all those 20 years?
Those little words of saying what happened to you.
Yeah.
It was a gift from God. It was like it happened at the right time. He wasn't even meant to be there. He never went to that club. He'd been barred from that club years before, fighting. He came into the back room and he never ever got into that room because it was like a private room. And it was just like, it was an alignment. And he said it at the right time. And that was it. Suddenly the pilot light had gone on. It was like, and I just looked and I just thought, I can't do this anymore. That was it. It had come to the end of the road. And he came in and said that, and then it kind of put the pilot light on, and it changed my life forever, because it suddenly, I'd gone from wanting to stop, I'd gone from wanting to die to actually thinking, you know what, I might have a chance here. And that was it. Hope.
That's hope, isn't it?
Hope turns into belief, and that's it. And the journey
and love.
continues.
And love as well.
Saves everything. You know, and I learned how to, you know, it's taken a long time though, Tina, over the years to learn how to love myself. I can love everyone else very easily, and I can love everything that everyone else does. But when it comes to me, it was a real big problem of learning how to love myself. I thought I loved everyone else. I didn't know what love was. I always thought love was giving and taking and receiving, presents or, you know, guilt stuff, and just learning the simple basics of how to live again was a hard job, but it was the best job I've ever done. Do you know what I mean? To get to the point where I can have these conversations with like-minded people over Zoom and not be ashamed of who I am anymore and what I've done and what I've been through, that we can share it with other people. It's remarkable.
It's liberating, isn't it? The first time I went somewhere to talk publicly about my experiences, I never ever publicly mentioned it before, you know. And when I did, and everybody was like-minded and was happy. It was like it was like a huge thing, a burden of this stigma had been lifted from me.
Yeah.
And no one should ever be ashamed. No one of anything what they've been through or who they are. Life's far too short for that these days.
It is, but we you know, until we actually get to that point of accepting who we are, that shame will override it and destroy us. And I think that for somebody who has friends that they think may have an eating disorder, or somebody that knows they have an eating disorder and that form of OCD, what would your advice be?
Well, what they need to know is it's very complicated. And what is not helpful is often I'll get parents in touch with me and they'll say, you know, we've tried to force feed our child or friend or whatever. It's not the issue. The food is not the issue. It's a psychological complex illness and it needs to be treated that way. So they first need to ask a question if they feel they can. They might not feel comfortable doing that, so that's fine, but they need to get them to the doctor somehow, because then they can refer them for specialist help. There's also a website called Beat Eating Disorders, which is the biggest charity in the UK for eating disorders, and it has huge amount of free resources on there. Like there's sibling chat rooms, there's family chat rooms, there's all sorts of things for the whole family. There's also like the Samaritans will talk about it. There's Childline. It depends on the age of the person, but the Samaritans are fantastic and they're obviously very confidential too. And if you can afford it, there's Mindbox, which is Anna Richardson, who's the presenter of Naked Dating, I think it's called.
Yeah, that's right.
Naked Attraction. She set up an online resource called Mindbox, and they do like specialist one-on-one online as well. There's Give Us a Shout, which is a free text service. There's so many things.
Also, we've got OA as well, which is 12-step.
Exactly.
And OA deals with overeating anonymous, but also undereating.
Yes.
So it deals with all of those problems. And those are the places that you're going to find like-minded people. No one's going to judge you if you're watching this and you've gone through this, or you're going through this, or loved ones are going through this right now. No one's there to judge you. They're there to help you. And as you say quite a lot in this, that shame is a big part of this. You know,
absolutely.
And
absolutely.
You know, no one's going to look down their nose on you and think, oh my God, you're a mess. What they are going to do is they're going to identify with you, and they're going to think, okay, this is what you need to do because this is what I did. And that's the magic of it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and what's nice about that, Tony, is it's like someone has your emotional back because you're vulnerable, right? And it's who wants to feel vulnerable? You can only do that if you trust and have the support of people around you that you really feel you can tell the truth to. So that is so important. And like-minded people really get it. So that makes all the difference.
And if, you know, if you are watching this and you identify with this, get Tina's books. Tina's books out there, it can really help you. And I never push people's books on here because this is not what it's about. But you know what? The stories, yeah, get this book because, you know, it's really important that people read. You know, read up on this stuff instead of going on the internet and looking at what they've got wrong with them. Biggest mistake you can do.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, yeah, well, I'm doing this. Oh, I've got cancer. That's where it always leads to it. It's just like, you know, get it sorted, go out and you know, and it's about opening your mouth. And you know, I always say if you don't open your mouth, you don't get fed, which is probably the wrong thing to say with an eating disorder. But you know what? It's true. It's that moment of asking for help that changes everything.
That's true. You said this before about asking. And as we say up here in Scotland, you've got a good Scottish tongue in your head. You know, you need to be able to ask. But unfortunately, with this illness in particular, it's very secretive and, you know, it's very, very as in hidden. But I just want a lot of people to know that although it might be their child, it might be their friend, they may seem like they hate you right now, but it's not them. It's only the illness. I mean, you'll probably have the same, Tony, with your experiences. You're lashing out at that person only because you're trying to keep this behavior into yourself and on control of it, when actually it's out of control. So don't give up on that person, and please know you're in it for the long haul as well. It's important.
Remember, it's not about you. It's not about food. It's not about any of those things. It's a mental disorder, and all of these things are just obstacles and things that we use to destruct lives, whether it be alcohol, food, sex, drugs, sushi, new shoes. The list is endless, you know. And thank you. I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. And as I said before, if you are struggling with this, go and get Tina's book, Seconds to Snap, all right? And it's a good read, trust me. Thank you so much. Big love, babe.
Thank you so much. Take care. Bye. Bye. Thank you.